This is Patrick from WSOU 89.5 FM, the loudest rock. Today I'm here with King Yosef. How you doing today?
Good. There's construction outside my house, but otherwise I'm doing great.
So let's get right into it. Your new songs, Cut the Cord and Shameless Mirror, are out now. Now, I read that Cut the Cord. It's got a very intense inspiration behind it, like a lot of your music does. But this one I thought was particularly interesting. Like I read it and I was just like, wow, like I literally went like that. Can you talk a little bit about what the inspiration for this song is?
Yeah, most of my like lyrics were kind of like Freudian to me. I write all like the first four lines of every King Yosef song have it's always been written when I'm like half asleep. So like that space when you're like, if you felt like you were gonna fall in your dream and you're gonna wake up still because you're not fully asleep, I generally leave my notepad open on my phone, and eventually the phrase will come to my head, and then I just write it down. I don't think about it, and then the next day I'll go back to it to kind of address it and keep writing. But yeah, so I wrote, in a desperate moment, you and I could be the same, leverage humility, weaponized for gain, and started working on the song. And it was one of those things where as I was writing it, I was just following kind of the impulse and like where it was leading me. And as I was going, I was starting to realize what I was talking about to myself. You know what I mean? It feels more like I'm not writing songs necessarily to be like, this is what I'm telling you, as much as it's like, this is my way of working through things. But somebody in my life passed away, that a family member who I've been pretty vehemently like anti that person. It's just a terrible human being. And he died. So I kind of came to this place where, the whole week leading up to writing those lyrics, I'd been thinking about like, what do I feel right now? Because my family was mourning a loss. And I wasn't. I was like, should I feel like, now he's gone and I disliked him my whole life? Am I going to feel something different? And really the sentiment of the song is no, I don't feel any different. Like my life is a testament to being a better person he ever was. So, you know what I mean? I win, I guess. But yeah, pretty dark, pretty brutal, but it just happened to be that way. It's not, I didn't set up to decide to write a song like that as much as it just happened. And I was like, well, apparently this is like what my subconscious is stewing on right now. Like, this is what I have to say. So I'm going to do it.
And when you're writing a song, you just said like the beginning of it is usually sort of unconscious, like you said, in that space when you're half asleep, half awake. For the rest of the song, how much would you say is you consciously knowing what you're doing versus it just kind of happening, not by accident, but just more naturally, I guess?
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit in between, like one of my biggest things when I write music is like even if I'm just writing a song instrumentally or lyrically, I'll be working on the track, and if I press play, my trick is to do anything else other than try to look at the screen where it's just going like this in the dock. Uh, Whatever I mouth next or like hum to myself, or if I do a vocal pattern just like subconsciously, that's where I try to go next. And so like it is directed, but it also is like I'm trying to like not get in my own way the most like I can, you know. It's like every time you write and you don't achieve a song, it's like you know what I mean? You sharpen your tools for the moment that you get into that moment where you're like, you don't have to think, you just operate, and everything that you've already learned just reinforces where you need to go, and you can like trust your gut instinct. So sometimes, like some lyrics I'm very particular about, but the phrasing of anything I've ever written too is also unconscious. Like I'm constantly like, da, da, da. Okay, like what are the first words that come to my mind? Write those out. And it's like that phrasing is going to stay. I may change words, but ultimately, like what I impulsively feel is supposed to be there is, I try to think about the fact of just like, what does my brain want? Because I'm a music listener, you know what I mean? Like that's what I should be telling myself back. So yeah, some of it's directed, some of it's very much like just flow. Like I'm trying not to impede on myself at all.
Right. And as someone who has worked for yourself, but also with other people, names like XXX Tentacion and also Ski Mask the Slump God, what is the approach to music when yourself is your client versus someone else? Is it the same sort of letting your unconsciousness guide you, or is it a completely different way of creating?
Um, Entering other people's worlds honestly easier to me because it's like there's already a sonic landscape kind of plotted out. You know what I mean? So I'm not gonna like, insert artist is like I work with Johnny. That's like the person I produce for the most nowadays. And her music, when I first came across it, it was like, I don't want to say in infancy, but she was only in her first like 10 songs. But I could like see where she was drawing influences from. And when I can see their influences, it like gives me something to reflect back to them and kind of like push in a direction that makes sense to me. So I think working with other people is like, it's a lot of fun too, because I do a lot of things I would not do on my own. When I'm doing like King Yosef stuff, it's very much like what is going to nourish me on like a soul level, like I'm have to feel some sort of accomplishment out of what I did, whether it be like what I said, what I achieved sonically, or like feeling like I didn't compromise. Whereas like those rules don't exist when I'm producing for somebody else. I'm fitting their vision. So like if the vision is like we need to write a pop song, then cool. I'm gonna write a pop song with you. And all those things just reinforce, all those tools being sharpened once again when I come back to write again. So it puts me in a lot of new spaces that I wouldn't normally explore. Um, and it just makes me more versatile and teaches me, like forces me to learn new things, which I think is important because the stagnation of anything, is eventually it'll just be dead in the water. So yeah, it keeps me fresh, I guess would be the best way to say it.
Yeah. Is there like a specific moment or specific song you can think of with another artist that impacted something you did with King Yosef?
Yeah, I think Johnny would probably be the biggest example. We don't occupy the same space by any means, but she is so open to, what I mean? Like it's not like, oh, I want a song at 145 beats per minute. It has to be an A minor. Like it's not that. She tells me a feeling that she wants. And so within that, it's like, okay, what do I know in my palette that's going to teach me like to get to this feeling she's talking about? And by proxy, I'll learn things that I'm like, I think it's one of her unreleased songs. We did a huge session about a year ago where we did probably 16 tracks in the studio. And there were a couple songs on her new record where I did something that I was like, I would have never done that. Like that is. And then even like the ambience on like Shame's Mirror and like that sort of stuff are direct things where I'm like, oh, that's this interesting thing that I didn't think about. And but Johnny's like the production for Johnny's stuff definitely pushes me and directly influences me back. It's really strange to be influenced by yourself, you know what I mean? To a degree. Like, but obviously once somebody else makes a song with something you wrote with them, it's not yours anymore. So I kind of get to like view it from the third perspective instead of it being like, oh, me and this person wrote the song. It's our song. It's more like, oh, I wrote this song and now they created it to what they want to be, and I can view it outside of myself. So yeah, it'd be hard to name a particular song at this point because they're unreleased, but quite a few with Johnny have taught me quite a few things.
Yeah, for sure. And you also put out an album last year, an underlying hum. And I know that a lot of this album was recorded and written while you were also touring, like a lot of your music is. How does recording and writing while touring impact the creative decisions that you make? If you're someone who kind of occupies an unconscious space a lot of times, how does being on the road versus being at home affect that space?
I think it teaches me like maybe the logistics of things. So like the core concepts of things that are not going to be like the details of things are not going to be done on the road. Like that'll never happen for me, I don't think, unless it's like, I get 3 days off between shows to sit at a studio or something. But what it does teach you pretty quickly is like you play a song and you know the tempo of it, like, obviously, like I'm composing all the music, so I know like, oh, this is 105 beats per minute because it's industrial music. So it's like, always the same. And watching the way the crowd reacts to certain tempos, to certain pauses, to certain things, it's uh like Cut the Chord was, you know, I had thought a lot about like the pacing of a song. And I didn't write it like, oh, I'm gonna make a crowd pleasing track. You know what I mean? As much as I was like, I know that if you start with something crazy when we play, that a crowd's like, oh, and I know that they respond to something that's really open and feels like it's pulsing. So it was like when I was writing it, I was like, oh, I have a fast part at the beginning of the song. I'm gonna make it start to swell down into something that builds back up, so that way the crowd can participate in that. So I think it really influences me, like just thinking about the real world when it comes to writing music. I used to write music just in my room by myself and not ever take into consideration like how it would be perceived. And now it's like it helps me to get to a new place as far as I can without feeling like I'm compromising, because I'm not compromising. The idea is to elicit some sort of emotion. So if I'm like, I know that if I go from this tempo to this tempo live, that's going to get a feeling that I want them to have. It teaches me a lot of like groundwork like that. And then I do write a lot of lyrics on the road, I would say. There's a lot of time in the van staring out the window, lots of just travel time. So, but I don't use most of those lyrics as much as it's the same thing of sharpening the tool. Like it's, just keeping it flowing. Like, and even then by writing on the road, it's like clearing up your subconscious a little bit to like get to the other things that maybe make more sense in the landscape of whatever King Yosef is.
Absolutely. And I love that you talked about like looking for the crowd's reaction to influence your writing, because like I feel like that's something that's very unique to metal as well. And last year you also opened for Greg Machado, and you're about to open for Health this upcoming month, and you also opened for Trace Amount, which is like three like really different worlds in terms of metal and industrial and
Yeah.
electronic. How does a crowd like Greg Machado, like a hardcore crowd, compared to a more experimental crowd like Trace Amount or Health for you?
Yeah, like I mean, this last year of playing shows and like opening for people, we did God like I got Godflesh last June, which was really crazy. And then we did Convergent last fall as well. And I'm getting like the whole spectrum, which is like, a lot of these people are people I look up to, but it doesn't necessarily mean when we occupy the same space at all. Um, I think really what it's shown me is like by my music being kind of without the bounds of like a conventional genre, you know what I mean? It's not like you don't listen to my music and be like, oh, this is sludge metal. You know what I mean? It's not like a specific type of thing. Is that within that there's a song that will work for most crowds, you know? And so like experimental crowds are not gonna mosh, but they might be the kind of people who buy more t-shirts because they're like, oh, I know I'm supporting you this way. So they might just stare at you and watch and be like, not even in a disrespectful way, but just like they're not crowd participation people. They're gonna clap after every song. They're gonna say nice things after the set and be awesome, but like they're not gonna give you like a visceral reaction. Whereas like, playing for bands where people are moshing, like that's more the scene I come from, just even before King Yosef. That's like more traditionally like, like a King Yosef show in Portland is generally going to have crowd killing, like, and people are going to be pretty violent. So that's more the space I understand. But, I think it's just like understanding how crowds like to participate. Like if we play for a more rock based crowd, sometimes all they want to do is just throw up the horns, you know what I mean? And that's okay. Like that's the type of crowd that they are. You know what I mean? They don't have to be all be moshers. So this last year of touring, I've definitely been like, okay, like we're playing for a more rock based crowd. Like I know which song I really need to like drive home because that's gonna be the song that they understand. And if we do the experimental stuff, then it's like sick. Like I can be a little bit more like boisterous and you know don't care about if the mic's feeding back. Like it's okay if I just throw the microphone on the monitor and let it freak out or something, like those sorts of things. So yeah, they differed a lot, but I would say generally speaking, like I always get a pretty nice reaction from people, which is, I know my music's very divisive, especially if you're uninitiated to it and like don't understand the root of it. It sounds like, you know, some Zoomer music, I would say, to a degree.
So you just mentioned Converge, and you did work on these singles and an underlying hum with Kurt Ballou from Converge. How did Kurt kind of elevate the sound of this recording? Because, like you said, you do kind of come from different spaces, but it's also kind of a space you understand, you know?
Yeah, I think yeah, so I worked with him and I worked with New Jersey's very own Steve Evans,
Right.
who, when I talked to him about WSOU, he had nothing but praise and was like the only college radio that can say they changed culture. Um, but yeah, working with Kurt and Steve was like, these are people that are on my, for lack of a better term, my Mount Rushmore of producers. The especially like that like 2012 to 2014 era of like Death Wish was like so imperative to my youth and like my understanding of what I thought things should sound like. So when I wrote the album, Kurt has a drum plugin, and I use the drum plugin to demo everything. And so then I was like, maybe I should just go record with him. I love the way his drums sound. I think I have enough language that I can explain to him my vision. And hearing the first mixes back after using his drum plugin and then hearing the drums, I was like, it's exactly what I wanted it to sound like. Like the way the kick and the snare sound, it's like exactly glued together. And it's also like, you know, everything, there's no right way to do anything, but there's ways to achieve things that other people might know about that you don't. I think is the biggest thing with music. And Kurt and Steve were very big on teaching me, and not just like, oh, I'm going to do this thing for you, kind of get out of my way, but like could tell that I'm hungry for knowledge when it comes to like progressing. And both of them were like very open to like, basically being teachers to me to any question I had. If I asked the question, it felt like they assumed that I truly wanted that information. So they were going to give it to me. But on a outside of the sonic space, even though too, both of them were very adamant on like teaching me to trust myself. You know, it's pretty hard to go for your first album to like the guy you like, the dudes you look up to, and then tell them that they're wrong about something. Whereas Kurt and Steve would constantly just be like, it's your vision, you know, and getting that sort of like reassurance and, just like boost up from people that you look up to is like, it made me feel so much stronger when it came time to do these new singles. Like these singles, I love the way the album sounds, but these singles sound the closest to what King Yosef sounds like in my head. You know what I mean? Because it was like they understand the vision so deeply now that it's like I can't imagine working with anybody else. Like they know exactly what I'm trying to do.
Exactly. And I did read that an underlying hum also kind of loosely connected to your previous album, The Ever-Growing Wound. Are there any aspects on Cut the Cord or Shameless Mirror that someone can listen for, like Easter eggs that might connect to an underlying hum, or is it separate?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that I'm not like an underlying hum is definitely a concept album,
Right.
but it's like, every song is a stream of consciousness trapped in a moment. Everything is like that is that time frame right then and there. So if I write something for 6 months, those 6 months are now consolidated to however long the record is. Um, so yeah, the thing that's not known is that when I wrote an underlying hum, I finished an underlying hum before I wrote The Ever-Growing Wound. And I knew that I'd been pretty silent on releasing music for long enough that I was like, one, I need to do something ahead of time just to get the gears rolling again, get out playing shows. And it was also like the sonic space I had moved to from my previous releases between an underlying hum. It was like so far away that I was like, I have to lay the groundwork to like, I kind of see it as the prologue. But if you listen to Um, the noise begins off the ever-growing wound. The last sound you'll hear, because UV Ray being a cover, the last sound you hear is the piano motif that plays throughout all of an underlying hum. And it plays very faintly in the background. And it's kind of like, this is the bookend here. The first time you start an underlying hum, very deeply in the background, the same exact piano line, same exact recording of the piano is playing right at the beginning. And then Cut the Chord and Shame's Mirror don't do anything sonically. Like there's no sonic Easter eggs, but like Cut the Chord is like a direct part two to 110817. Like they occupy the same ideas and concepts, and lyrically, it is like the bookend to that song as well. So, yeah, it's all. If you go deep enough and you look at the details, like everything is very connected, and it's not even by like a meticulous plotting as much as it's just like, you know, I'm just moving through a stream of things. So like as I'm grabbing them, things just become connected over time.
Right. And I do want to close out with asking this question here. One of the earliest articles I found about you when I was doing research was from 2019 from Revolver, and the headline was it was Meet Producer Screamer King
Yep.
Yosef, and I thought producer screamer was such an interesting term. 5 years later, having put out multiple albums during that time, you've opened for Converge and Godflesh. You're about to open for Health in March. What would you call yourself, King Yosef?
I think I will say to a degree, it is very funny in hindsight that like that's the way I'm phrased. But at that time, that was me transitioning from just being a producer. So it felt like the tagline was like, oh, well, he's trying to do the artist thing on his own, but he's a producer. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely call myself like, I feel pretty confident in King Yosef as a body of work now as I'm moving forward. Like, I would definitely say I'm an artist and I'm a producer at this point. Um, they're not mutually exclusive to each other. Sometimes they bleed into each other, but I think that's kind of like, the that is the space of it. Is it's like whether I produce a record as King Yosef or I make a song as King Yosef, if it feels like you can't differentiate it, it's like, yeah, it's because I worked on it. Like that's what I sound like. I have started going by my legal name for albums I produce a little bit more. Just even when it's like, I worked on this band VTB, they're my great friends, but it's like an indie rock post punk album. It doesn't need to say King Yosef on it. Like that is a Tavis thing, if that makes any sense. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would definitely describe myself as an artist and a producer. So I just changed from screamer to artist, I would say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for doing this. King Yosef, Cut the Chord, Shameless Mirror out now, and Underlying Hum. Also check that out, as well as, whole body of work. You're playing Brooklyn Steel on March 15th, so definitely try to make it out to that.
Amen.
Anything else you want to add, man?
I just want to shout out New Jersey in general. I recorded all the vocals for the two new singles in Belleville. I'd never been to Jersey before. Trace Amount is from Jersey. One of my best friends is from Jersey. So I have a lot of like random Jersey lore in my life.
Yeah.
But it seems that the state brings me nothing but awesome people. And so I got a shout out to Jersey.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. This is Patrick, WSOU, loudest rock in Jersey, 89.5.